The Sacramento Kings have been at the top of the headlines, especially since making star guard De'Aaron Fox available for trade ahead of the 2025 NBA trade deadline. That leaves NBA fans and Kings fans in a state of question and concern and worry. What will happen with the Sacramento Kings? Will they make big trades? What will they do? I'm going to give my trade deadline predictions here for the Sacramento Kings in today's video. I hope you guys really do enjoy. If you do, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel for more. And if you're a Kings fan, I need to know how diehard of a Kings fan you really are. How long have you been a fan of this team? Many of you withstood some of the dark days of Sacramento Kings basketball, post some of their early great runs in the early 2000s. So, if you've been a fan through some of the dark days, or if you're a new recent fan, comment down below how long have you been a fan for. I'm going to be leaving those little hearts on every single one of those comments in today's video. I read every comment on the channel. And let's get into it here with the video preview regarding the Sacramento Kings and the trade deadline. In this video, I will give you 3 predictions for the Kings ahead of the deadline. These predictions can be quite wide-ranging. Some might have to do with the luxury tax or salary cap apron. Some might have to do with will they shed salary? Will they add salary to their books? Some might have to deal with role players. Some might have to deal with a star player. Cough, cough, De'Aaron Fox. We'll see what happens in today's video, but I really hope you guys, again, do enjoy. And then the big reminder here. This is the most important reminder that I can give you in this video. I will be live on the channel the entire week of the NBA trade deadline, so make sure to stay tuned for that. Hit that notification bell so you're notified when I am going live. And let's jump into it here now with prediction number 1. I think the Sacramento Kings are going to stay below the luxury tax line. I think this is a pretty safe, pretty honest prediction for what will actually occur at the trade deadline. Currently, Sacramento is about $3 million below the tax line as they currently sit. And some of you might say, well, of course, obviously they'll stay below the tax line. Now, I think there is going to be some things to figure out in the process here. De'Aaron Fox, if you trade a huge contract like him, which we'll talk about later on in this video, there is potential avenues where you're either taking in more salary or you're looking at ways to kind of move around your salary a little bit. And with that in mind, I think the Kings, one of their prerogatives, one of the important details that they're going to be paying a ton of attention to is not just trying to get value, trying to extract value from every trade that they make. The collective moves together, everything that they do collectively needs to point the Sacramento Kings to staying below that tax line as well. So maybe their salary does increase. Maybe if they do trade De'Aaron Fox, or if they trade some other role players on their team, if they trade other salaries, maybe DeMar DeRozan, there's some rumors about him, right? If they make some type of bigger trade, if they move some of their bigger contract players, I think Sacramento, not only are they going to try and maximize the value in return, but they're also going to collectively make sure that they as a team stay below that tax line for the 2025 season, which I think is very smart. You don't want to just enter the tax for no reason, especially with where Sacramento's at in the overall NBA standings right now, the Western Conference standings, and then also given the fact that they might be trading their star point guard, De'Aaron Fox, who a lot of people would argue was an all-star snub. Domantas Sabonis was also an all-star snub, a significant one in my estimation. The Kings, at this point in time, they have a lot of questions that need to be answered, but this is one that I can very firmly guarantee to you. The Kings will stay below the tax line. I do not see them becoming a tax team this year. Regardless of whatever trade packages they accept or decide to do at the deadline, they're not going to enter the tax. They're $3.212 million below it right now, and I expect them to stay below that tax line. Now, their team salary could increase a little bit. They have a little bit of room here up until the tax line, but again, I do not see them exceeding or going past that tax line in any collection of trades that they potentially make at the 2025 NBA trade deadline. Prediction number 2, and this one centers around Monte McNair, who has been extremely creative and kind of risky. He's had some big cojones in some of his moves in the past, and I think with him overseeing the ship here right now still in Sacramento, I think the Kings look to avoid a true rebuild, whether that comes down to trading DeMar DeRozan, trading De'Aaron Fox, what other pieces that they can maybe offer. I still think Sacramento internally looks at Domantas Sabonis as a build-around player, someone that their offense clearly relies on heavily. He's a triple-double machine, should have been an all-star in the 2025 NBA All-Star Game. It's a shame that he didn't make it. Hopefully he gets in some form or fashion. Obviously, there's still ways with injury replacements, those kinds of things, but not hoping anyone gets hurt either. So I think for Sacramento here specifically, if they're trying to find ways to build their roster after these trades, I think, people are going to throw in draft picks. You're going to throw in all these young players. You're going to throw in, kind of promising raw pieces, whether that be draft capital or, rookie players or second-year players. I think for Sacramento, their aspiration here is to avoid a rebuild. And there's some interesting names. Could someone like Zion Williamson from the Pelicans be on the Kings' radar? Now, I think that fit with Domantas Sabonis is kind of clunky. Now, I think, Zion's athletic traits, cutting, and his ability to play off of handoffs would be really good in Sacramento with Sabonis. But then also offensively, there are just some limitations in terms of which areas of the court those two both occupy. And does putting Sabonis next to Zion really maximize Zion's rim finishing capability? Probably not. So I think, and then defensively too, there's some issues. So I think Sacramento could be like a sleeper team to watch for someone like Brandon Ingram, Zion Williamson, other players around the league as well. Maybe someone like CJ McCollum, which would be kind of strange but fascinating. Seems like I have the Kings being interested in a lot of those Pelicans players. While I don't necessarily think something like that really gets done, I think the Kings are going to be exploring a ton of these options, and I think ultimately if they do make some kind of big trade, it's not just going to be your typical, okay, well, we just want old, bad salary or expiring salary and 4 or 5 first-round picks. They're looking for players. They're looking for guys who can actually fit on this roster, that have some upside if they do trade for young players, but more so, they're looking for guys who they believe are going to be good long-term pieces. And the way I'm looking at this specifically, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on this in the comment section, I'm kind of looking at Monte McNair to almost reverse engineer the Tyrese Halliburton Domantas Sabonis trade. And by reverse engineer, I don't mean trade Sabonis. I don't mean try and trade for Halliburton. Those days, that ship has sailed, okay? What I mean is how Sacramento traded Tyrese Halliburton for an established all-star caliber player. The roles are now reversed. Sacramento has the established player who is in the heart of his prime, De'Aaron Fox, someone who should have a very wide range trade market across the NBA landscape. They have that kind of player now. And it'll be fascinating to see how they go about these trade discussions, and do they look for maybe a 1-for-1 swap or, a 2-for-1 swap where they get the young player and a draft pick that they think could be pretty beneficial to their overall team building construct. Remember, the Kings do owe their 2025 first right now out the door to Atlanta from the Kevin Huerter trade. So the Kings are at a small draft pick deficit, and they also have De'Aaron Fox's huge contract and huge long-term future question up in the air right now. What will the Kings look to do? I think reverse engineering that Domantas Sabonis Tyrese Halliburton trade in a way, using Fox's contract to go get some other young player who they believe in. While it's not a rebuilding mode, it's a quick retool mode, which is a little bit different. I just don't see the Kings, though, after 15 years of really bad basketball in Sacktown, I just don't see them going back into a full rebuild. And I think Monte McNair, the Kings, are going to do everything they can to avoid that potential outcome. Here we are now to the big ticket item. De'Aaron Fox and his future with the Sacramento Kings. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I would have said, no way are the Sacramento Kings trading De'Aaron Fox. Even though I was sounding the alarm a little bit when Fox went on Draymond Green's podcast, I was a little concerned, I was a little hesitant, a little unsure what De'Aaron Fox's future really did look like after his comments on that podcast. But with all things considered, how things have quickly changed, how the Kings were the team that approached De'Aaron Fox to talk about a trade rather than De'Aaron Fox ultimately demanding or requesting one, I think points to the fact that the Kings are willing and able and going to probably make some kind of deal at this trade deadline. And you might say, well, why would they rush? Why would they make their move now? Why would they make the trade this deadline and not wait until the offseason? They still have 1.5 years of team control. And you're completely right. The reason why I think that they push the chips in ultimately and do trade De'Aaron Fox now is it widens their market. If he's just flat out an expiring contract, if they wait till next year, whether that be in the offseason or the trade deadline next year, teams are going to look at him as a very definite flight risk, a rental. And for Sacramento, that's not how you're going to extract the most value. If you trade him now, a team's going to look at it and say, well, we get him for not 1, but 2 potential playoff runs. Thinking back to his 1 playoff series against Golden State, De'Aaron Fox and his pull-up jump shot, really translated extremely well to the postseason. The pace that he was able to play with, the downhill force that he obviously brings as a ball handler, and then the shot making display was just incredible. And I think a lot of teams right now should be honestly replaying a lot of that tape against Golden State. De'Aaron Fox was by far the best player for the Kings in that series. He outshined everybody else significantly to the point where the Warriors were aggressively sending doubles, leaving Harrison Barnes wide open. If you guys remember that missed game winner, sorry Kings fans, shouldn't have brought that up. But I think that's a testament to what De'Aaron Fox can be. And if you're trying to maximize his value right now, which is what the Kings seemingly are doing, trading him ahead of not one but two playoff potential appearances for the team that is acquiring him is when he's going to have his best value at this point in time. Trading him as a rental is going to really jeopardize your value. And the Sacramento Kings, I think there's one downfall here for them. The San Antonio Spurs, who I have at the very top of the pyramid, the place that De'Aaron Fox reportedly wants to go, which I think is a very smart career decision for him, by the way. I think San Antonio specifically is a really tricky destination because even though the Spurs have pieces that the Kings would want, like Stephon Castle, Spurs fans are going to say that's a non-starter, and I think the Spurs will be hesitant to trade him. Devin Vassell, a player who I'm just not giving away for free. I really like Devin Vassell. I think he can be a number 3 guy on a very, very, very good team in the NBA with his shot making, shooting gravity, and his off-ball movement skills offensively. And I think he holds up enough defensively as well to be kind of that go-to third option, that go-to wing for a team. And I think with Fox and Wemby would be really great. The Spurs aren't going to want to just readily include him. Now the Spurs have all the draft capital in the world, but I already talked about how Sacramento is probably looking to maybe either reverse engineer the Domantas Sabonis trade, or they're trying to get win-now players, and San Antonio doesn't really have that to offer, and the Spurs have 2026 cap space when Fox will be a free agent, so it's possible San Antonio says, well, maybe we'll just sit on our laurels here, be a little patient, and see if we can just get Fox organically through free agency. Now, listen, there's going to be people saying, well, Fox would lose money that way. Kind of, but not really. The $77 million figure that's been thrown around about how much money he would lose signing in San Antonio without bird rights instead of Sacramento. First of all, while that number is quote-unquote correct, that factors a 5-year contract compared to a 4-year contract, which I don't think is going to be the biggest deal in the world. And it also doesn't factor in state income taxes, where there's no income tax in Texas. So for 45 of his games, 2 against Dallas, 2 at Houston, and then 41 at home for San Antonio, he would basically not get taxed on that money at all, which would be very, very significant. That's over half of his NBA season. Whereas in Sacramento, when he plays at Golden State twice, he plays at the Lakers twice, at the Clippers twice, and 41 games at Sacramento, that's 47 games that are getting California taxes on them, which is a pretty significant difference. So that $77 million mark, even though it's true and accurate in reporting, it's really not going to be the actual take-home difference between his two contracts. So keep that in mind, Kings fans. I don't think staying in Sacramento is the most obvious decision either, even if they do offer him the max, since he will likely not be eligible for a supermax extension. Now, Houston, another team that could be on the radar. Brooklyn has a theoretical collection of assets that they could cash in at any given moment. We'll see if something happens there. The Warriors, Heat, Magic are all teams I could see expressing some interest, although Orlando gets a little tricky with their long-term cap sheet, given the fact that Wagner and Banchero both are going to be on huge deals. And then also, if you factor in Fox's upcoming extension onto that, Orlando's not a team I see wanting to jump super far with Jalen Suggs and everyone else on their roster, how deep they are currently. I just don't know if they want to be an apron team, which is ultimately what they'd be signing themselves up for. Golden State, you have the Curry connection, obviously. The Heat with the Jimmy Butler saga would try and walk away somehow, pairing Bam Adebayo back up with De'Aaron Fox. The two of them obviously have an existing relationship. So it would be fascinating, but I do think ultimately the Kings do cash in on De'Aaron Fox. I think there's several different ways that they can go about doing so. And I want to know, Kings fans, which is the best way to do it? Is it full rebuild, which I already don't think is going to happen? Or do you think it's something in the middle where it's either trade for a young player that the Kings really believe in or trade for veteran established players? It'll be a fascinating situation to monitor. Not exactly sure, but Houston, they've got different ways to get to De'Aaron Fox's money. It's a fascinating situation, one that I did not really expect to arise at the trade deadline, but I'm really excited we have this question now to get answered for these upcoming trade deadline live streams. A bonus prediction here for you as well. So I promised 3 predictions. You're actually getting 4. I think the Kings could very likely move on from one of either Trey Lyles or Kevin Huerter or theoretically both. And this is where the Kings have some significant optionality. I talked earlier about the Kings owing their first round pick to the Atlanta Hawks. Now, if they were to kind of finagle the protections and the backups on that, they could make it possible to open up more draft capital able to be traded. Now, the Stepien rule does limit them quite a bit right now, but with a little bit of work with Landry Fields and the Atlanta Hawks, who I think would be open and willing to hear those discussions, the Kings could, in theory, go out, trade De'Aaron Fox, and then also use these salaries. Trey Lyles making a little bit over $8 million. Kevin Huerter making a little bit over $16 million. Lyles is an expiring contract. Huerter has just 1 year left on his deal. These are not immovable pieces at all. Huerter, obviously, for his career, has been a very good shooter. Not so much the last couple of seasons, unfortunately, for Sacramento, which I think has had a huge impact on their regular season win mark from where they were a couple of years ago to where they are presently. But overall, the Kings have essentially $24 million of very tradable salary here. So if you add that with De'Aaron Fox, who's making over $34 million, the Kings have nearly $60 million in readily available for trade salaries. And I think that would be extremely fascinating. I think in the bonus prediction here, what I'm really looking at is not only Sacramento making some kind of De'Aaron Fox trade like I've talked about, but also looking to maybe upgrade in other ways. If they find ways to move future first-round picks, they could go out and get some type of player for De'Aaron Fox, whether that be a young player, an established player, and then they could also load up a little bit more with Trey Lyles and Kevin Huerter here. If you look at the Kings cap sheet moving forward, they have quite a bit of room against the tax next year as well right now. So Trey Lyles, even though he's expiring, they could factor in moving these two players and still fitting someone into their roster around that, $22 to $25 million mark. Could that be someone like Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets? That would be a real tremendous addition. If Sacramento walks out of the De'Aaron Fox trade with a win-now player, or a player who Sacramento thinks is going to be very quickly ready to be a win-now guy over the next couple of years, if that's a Stephon Castle or maybe a Reed Shepard from Houston, not saying it will be either of those two, but theoretically, if it were to be, Sacramento could feel really, really good about making some other kind of win-now addition, where they do maybe a little bit of selling and a little bit of buying at the trade deadline. And I think the Kings will be active with Trey Lyles. They'll be active with Kevin Huerter's contracts. They'll be making and placing plenty of calls around the league to see if they can find some type of deal using these two contracts, one or both of them, and draft capital to make a meaningful upgrade on their team. I think that kind of trade is out there for them if they really want to go that direction. Again, Cam Johnson's the name that first comes to mind, but there's a variety of different players that could make some sense in that conversation. Bruce Brown's expiring contract from Toronto could make some sense as well. I don't want to rule that out. There's a lot of teams and a lot of players that could get involved in this kind of price range between anywhere from $8 million if you're talking just Trey Lyles, $16 million range if you're looking at just Kevin Huerter, or that $24 million combined salary. You're looking at anyone from $21 to $26, $27 million. And the Kings, remember, have a little bit of trade flexibility this year because of their room from the luxury tax we talked about earlier, that $3.2 million number that we brought up earlier. So Sacramento's got a lot of flexibility. I think they're one of the more fascinating trade teams. This prediction video was really difficult to put together because there's so many things I think Sacramento could do. They have so much flexibility, which is a really good thing. If you're a Kings fan, you should be extremely happy about that. But there's also a lot of unanswered questions right now. And I think for me and for everyone that's watching, I think Sacramento is going to be one of the scary teams to watch because they could either do something really big and good for themselves. They could set themselves back in a big way if they have a bad trade deadline here and make bad moves, or they could just kind of keep themselves where they currently are. They could keep everybody and not make any huge trade. Now, again, that's not what I'm predicting in this video, but when it comes to optionality, the Kings have so many different ways to go, a lot of different things that they could theoretically accomplish at the trade deadline. So if you're a Kings fan, buckle up. It's going to be a fun week here ahead of you for the NBA trade deadline. For that week, don't forget to come check out the live streams. We'll be live on the channel the entire week starting early Monday morning. Be live on Tuesday, Wednesday, and of course on Thursday. We're starting really early in the morning on Thursday, the week of the NBA trade deadline. So make sure you guys are in tune for that. Would love to have you all in there. I'll be reading your comments, everything you have to say. And if you guys did enjoy today's video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.